Hello, everybody. Okay, man, this has been a beautiful month of topics on the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show, and today is falling right in line with something that is so important that I continue to see in my coaching practice. Y'all, we are going to get into it tonight or today, whenever you're listening to this podcast, whenever you are joining me. If you are joining me live, go ahead and drop your name and where you're joining me from in the chat so I can give you a shout out. But listen, we are going to be talking all about overcoming perfectionism, and it is a topic that we need to talk about right after this. All right. I'm excited because this topic right here, let me just tell you, it's something we need to talk about. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me live on the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show. We are going to get into it. Okay, so here's the thing. So many people suffer from perfectionism, and a lot of those people wouldn't even call themselves perfectionists, right? And I think, when you start calling yourself something or when you start labeling yourself, that's when it starts to get really scary and spooky and all those things. But there are a lot of us who have behaviors that would put us in the category of perfectionists. And I really want to talk about it today because these behaviors, these things that we're doing are hindering us. If you were here with us last week, we talked all about unrealistic expectations that we put on ourselves and how to overcome those. And perfectionism is a result or actually breeds unrealistic expectations in our lives. And so, y'all know I love a good old juicy definition. So I have three for you today that I want to share with you about perfectionism. And I want you to see if you see yourself in any of these three definitions in terms of how you show up in the world, how you behave, how you act. So the first definition I love that we are going to talk about is the tendency to demand or to demand of others or oneself an extremely high, flawless level of performance. Let me say that again. The tendency to demand of others or yourself an extremely high demand, extremely high or flawless level of performance in excess of what is required for the situation. Okay. So let me just say this right now. There are some key words in here that I think are something that we need to absolutely think about in our lives. Okay, let me just let me see this. Let me do that right there. Okay. And so there's some key terminology. So let's dig into it. Demand. Demand is one of those words that takes away your choice in the matter. When you demand something of somebody, you are really saying that this is something that you have to do. It's a must. It is not negotiable. It's something that you have to do. And I think when we put all these demands on our lives, then that's when things can get hard. Another part of this is, I love this, flawless. Now, I know we have all these songs about being flawless and beautiful and all that kind of stuff. And that's one thing, but absolutely do not always expect for yourself or other people to be flawless. And then I love when it says demand of others or yourself. And I see this show up. So when you are a perfectionist, when you have to show up for yourself in a perfect and flawless way, more than likely you have to show up for other people have to show up like that for you too. You don't give people room to grow, to be human, or any of that. You don't give people room to do that. And I think that that is really hard for us all around when nobody has flexibility to show up for themselves, and to show up around you being just themselves. That is tough. All right, another definition. Perfectionism in psychology. Y'all know I'm a positive psychologist, so I had to share this one with you. Is a broad personality trait. Y'all know I love character traits. We dig into those all the time when we're talking about strengths. So it is a broad personality trait characterized by a person's concern with striving for flawlessness. There's that word again, and perfection, and it's accompanied by critical self evaluations and concerns regarding other people's evaluations of themselves. So, what is this saying? First of all, it's saying that if you want to break this down, is that it's a personality trait. It's something that you show up with in your personality. And it is, you're so concerned with striving for perfectionism that you evaluate yourself critically most of the time. And man, let me just say this to you. As I'm coaching, I can see this happening all the time when my clients show up in the session and they are absolutely critical of themselves. They're beating themselves up because they're not flawless. And I see it in everyday life with just regular people in my life, how they beat themselves up for the very smallest things. Well, it's small to us, but sometimes it's big to you, right? And then the last definition I'm going to read you is perfectionism is a personality trait or a mindset characterized by setting extremely high standards for oneself and striving for flawlessness in one's work, accomplishments, and or personal qualities. So, first of all, if we dissect the word flawlessness, that means there cannot be a flaw. Flaw meaning something that may be wrong or anything like that. And here's the issue about perfectionism. It doesn't allow you to move. It doesn't allow you to move forward in your life like you want to. As a matter of fact, it hinders you so very much in the things that you want to accomplish, because a lot of times what I see is that my clients can't get out of their own way because things have to be absolutely perfect. So I'm gonna share a little story with you. I can remember when I was starting my business, and I had, started the business. And when you start a business, of course everybody tells you you need a website and you need this visual so that people can come find out about you, read about you, so that they can buy your services. And early on in the day, when I started my business, I didn't necessarily have a lot of money. And I also didn't necessarily have a lot of clients lined up to pay me for my speaking engagements. It got better, okay, over the years. All right. But in the beginning, it wasn't there. And I can remember working with my husband, Jamil, who is awesome. Hey, babe. I remember working with him on my very first website. And y'all, the arguments and the tension and everything that me and him went through, because I absolutely had to have the website to be perfect. It had to be flawless in my eyes in order for us to launch. And it caused so much drama. Now, because my husband, he's a graphic design, he's a computer programmer, but he also knows, he builds websites, he knows front end, back end, all that kind of stuff. So I'm blessed, right? I'm absolutely blessed, first of all, to have somebody helping me on my websites. But I couldn't get it together. We differed on a lot of the things that we thought were nice, and we just argued sometimes, and it took us twice as long to launch my website than it should have, because I wanted it to be absolutely perfect before I launched. I could have been in the space, in the ether, right? Weeks upon weeks before I was there, only because I was trying to be perfect. And I realized that throughout my career, I also took that same perfectionism into every single thing I used to do. And so if it wasn't right, if the sales page wasn't right, if the copy wasn't completely flawless, then I wasn't launching. And so I believe that I missed a lot of opportunities in my life because I was trying to be perfect, because I wanted to show up flawless, because I had this thing in me that if I didn't absolutely show up perfect, then people were going to say stuff. Ooh, because that's a lot of times why we are trying to be perfect for other people, because we care so much about what other people say to us. So I say that, I give you that example because I've been through all of these things. I've been through all of these things. And it wasn't until I learned how to overcome my perfectionism by some of the things we're going to talk about today on the show, that I was able to get free from that. Because I'm going to tell you, perfectionism will have you locked up in chains. Because did you know that, perfectionists hold themselves unreasonably to these high standards. And it is like unreasonably. Like I said, last week I talked about unrealistic expectations. When you're a perfectionist, you hold yourself unreasonably to these high standards. And perfectionists also tend to have more burnout. So this is mental health month. And a lot of times we've been talking about burnout and getting what you need in terms of therapy, coaching, self-care. But when you're a perfectionist and when you have to do everything perfect and right, you're more likely to get burnout than a person who understands flexibility and understands that things are not going to be perfect. Right? You hold yourself up here, and that causes burnout. So one of the questions that I want you to ask yourself, if you consider yourself a perfectionist, or if you have perfectionism tendencies, right? Because I like saying it that way. So, because when we label ourselves something, then that takes away our power. But if you have perfectionism tendencies, then you can absolutely overcome perfectionism. It gives you the power to think about how can you overcome this thing, this trait that's in you, so that you can move on and do better in your life, right? So we're going to talk about perfectionism tendencies. If you have perfectionism tendencies, right, then you can overcome those by some of the things that we're going to talk about today. But if you have those tendencies in you, you're more likely to not like your job. You're more likely to be stressed out by your job or your family or friends or all the things that are happening in your life. You're more likely to be burnt out, and that's not what you want. In addition, did you know that your environment plays a big deal in your development around perfectionism? So lately, I've been talking to a lot of people and a lot of clients around trauma, right? Like a lot of us grew up in these traumatic households, had traumatic experiences in our life. I'm one of them, right? Which is why I'm a huge, huge, huge component for therapy, for coaching, because we had some of us, we had some real jacked up lives growing up, right? And we all, need some way to process that. And I know everybody is not necessarily on the therapy bandwagon, but I'll say it again, that it helps, it works. You might not even be on the therapy bandwagon, you might not even be on the coaching bandwagon, but it helps and it works. But when it comes to our topic at hand in terms of overcoming perfectionism, your environment, how you grew up, can breed perfectionism inside of you. If you grew up watching your mama be super perfect, having to have everything right and beating herself up when she didn't do something right, then chances are you saw that and you internalized it, right? If you grew up being in a very chaotic situation like myself, right? Because my mom wasn't perfect. I love her to death, but she wasn't. So for me, in order to cope, I needed things to be good. I needed things to be perfect. I needed to strive for the very best because I was growing up in a chaotic situation. See, we don't relate some of the things that we're going to in adulthood to our past experiences, but it can really shed light on why you show up the way that you're showing up. And so for me, I was showing up in my life, in my business, trying to be perfect because I didn't have a perfect childhood, right? What are you and what experiences are shaping how you show up in your life right now? If you are showing up in perfectionism, ask yourself, sit down with yourself and say, all right, what experiences am I showing up with right now? Right? And then what experiences have influenced that in the past? It's so good, y'all. This is so good. I hope y'all getting it because these are really powerful questions that you can walk away from this episode and really ask yourself if you're struggling with perfectionism tendencies, right? Okay. And so there is a part of perfectionism that can have a genetic component. But that's why I said environment plays a huge deal with that. And then studies show that high blood pressure is more relevant among people who have perfectionistic tendencies. Come on, y'all. We out here trying to get everything right, and we got high blood pressure, we got burnout, we got stress, all these things. Absolutely not. We have to absolutely cut it out. And then the last one that I want to share with y'all, and these are just like really important facts about perfectionism, is a lot of people who have a all or nothing mentality suffer so much when it comes to their life. And y'all know I always talk about all or nothing. I believe that you can have both and, right? We don't have to have an all or nothing mentality in our life, but when it has to be one way, then you do not leave room for flexibility in your life, nor do you leave room for people to show up flexible in your life. It does not have to be all or nothing. It can be both and. You can, still want things to be great, but you can also leave flexibility for and room for mistakes, right? And if you can't make mistakes in your life, then life is going to be very tough. And that's just the God's honest truth. It's going to be super tough. And I will say, for me, over the years, I've really had to learn this lesson because guess what, honey? I've made some mistakes. I've made so many mistakes that I can't keep count. Chances are you have too, but it depends on how you show up in those mistakes after you've made them. Because I truly believe that we all deserve second chances when we make the mistakes in our lives and our family. And if you don't give yourself that second chance, right? If you don't give yourself that second chance, you darn sure is not going to give nobody else that second chance, right? So I'm trying to show you how to show up more flexible so that you love yourself and that others love you as well because they can show up around you. They can show up around you. So I'm going to share with you a couple things that help me overcome my perfectionistic tendencies because let me tell you, baby, they were absolutely there. All right. They were prevalent and they were really making life hard for myself, right? So the first thing that I want you to do is I want you to understand your childhood experiences. I'm taking y'all back, y'all. This is maybe some self therapy, some self coaching that you may be doing with yourself. And I wanted you to understand your perfectionistic, your childhood experiences, right? Because we all have these childhood experiences that shaped us. And in my book, Get Courageous Now, I have a whole chapter on really exploring, right? Analyzing your story. So you can pick up the book on Amazon, but it's in chapter 7 of the book, and it says discover who you really are. Because I truly believe that how you show up today um, it has so much to do with your past. But if you don't want to show up how you're showing up, you can become who you want to be. You just have to do some work. You got to do the work. None of us are going to get to where we want to go in life without doing the work. And my job as a coach is to help you go from A to where you want to be, right? That's what I do as a coach, which is the reason why I'm always showing up and asking you powerful questions in your life. And so, from the book, Get Courageous Now, chapter 7, I have some really, really powerful questions so that you can answer and start to understand your childhood. So, like the first one, the first question in the book, it says, what is your very first memory? Some of y'all have some really good memories and can think far back. I don't particularly think I have really great memory, especially as it goes far back. I think it was a coping mechanism, and you know what? We got to do what we got to do. But I don't think I have, I don't remember back when I was like 2 years old or 3 years old. Some people do remember when they're three. I do have some early memories, but I don't think I was young as three. So, what was your first memory? What was your overall childhood experience? And I'll tell you this for me, I grew up, and a lot of y'all know a lot of my story, but I grew up sleeping on the couch in the crack house while my mom was upstairs getting high. And that shaped a lot of my childhood. But I know it wasn't always like that. I just don't remember a lot of what it was prior to the drug addiction, but I do remember good and bad times during the addiction. And so I had to learn how to be, how to behave, how to do certain things that maybe you shouldn't be doing as a young person. I had to learn all those things, and all those experiences that I had absolutely shaped who I am. Good, both good and bad. Now, I also believe that as you get older, you have choice, and we choose to stay in certain situations in our lives. And so for me, I chose not to be a victim of my situations because, to be honest with you, I love my mama to death. Still do. I wish she was still here. She passed away now about 14 years ago. Um, and I miss her every single day. And I also know that I am so strong because of her, and everything that I went through taught me resilience. So the truth is, I could have stayed in that though. I could have wallowed in the fact that I used to have to sleep on the couch in the crack house. I could have wallowed in the fact that we didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, which subsequently created a poverty mindset in myself until I broke that as well, right? Like all these things really played into the fact that I became who I am based on some of the things and the experiences that I had back then, but I also now choose to become the woman I want to be. And you have that very same choice in your life, but you have to understand how your childhood experiences play into what you're experiencing this day. It was so awesome yesterday. I got a text from a friend who said that her brother has been experiencing some, burnout, some stress, and all these things, and now he's willing to face it and wants to get into therapy. And my heart jumped for joy because we are suffering in silence. We show up not not the way we want to in life, and we wonder why, and we refuse to get help. Baby girl, it's time. It is absolute time for us to show up and stand up and put ourselves first and get what we need. But that's number one, by understanding how your childhood experiences affect you to this very day. And when it comes to perfectionism, I needed to be perfect because everything else was chaotic. And I learned a long time ago, what I can control is myself. I can control me. So if I show up perfect, if I show up excellent, if I show up flawless, then I'm good. And I think it's part of why I'm so driven to this day. And people can see my drivenness as a good thing or a bad thing, right? I have 4 degrees. Who needs four? I joke about it, right? But I mean, like, there is no more degrees I can get. Not that I want to, but I mean, just striving for that excellence at all times, right? So it can show up in your life either good or bad. You be the choice. Ask yourself, how is this serving you right now? Okay. So that is one. Um, so another way to overcome perfectionism is to set reasonable, y'all remember I talked about it last week, I call them push or dream goals, right? When we set goals for ourselves, they always need to have an element of like, okay, I'm gonna have to climb for that one. I'm gonna have to, I'm gonna have to push for that one. I'm gonna have to, reach and reach, dig in to who I think I am and who I know me to be to reach that goal. But it's not so far gone that you're like, oh yeah, no, I'm gonna set this goal and I'm gonna be a billionaire tomorrow when you haven't even made a million, right? Like, we have to be realistic enough about our goals that they are still somewhat out of reach. They're still dreams, but you know in your heart of hearts that you can reach them. And I think that that is super important. And then, the other thing about setting reasonable goals, you don't have to get to the goal right now and tomorrow. So I set dream goals that I might not hit, and I might know that I'm not going to hit them for another 10 years, right? But they're still a goal of mine, but I might not hit it for another 10 years. But I'm not going to set a 10-year goal for myself to reach in a year, because that would be insanity and that would be unrealistic. And then now I'm striving to be perfect, right? I got to do everything exactly right in order to hit this goal, but it's already unreasonable. So we have to set those dream goals, but they need to be realistic enough that you can hit them, right? But they need to be pushed enough. They need to be out of reach enough that you're going to challenge yourself to get there, right? And I love it because I give myself those goals all the time. And I know that with those goals, it's going to take me step by step getting to them. Especially when you have a big goal that you are reaching, you can't skip steps. A lot of us want to skip steps, but when we skip steps, that causes us to have to be more perfect and more flawless, because once we get to a step that we're not prepared for, now we don't know what to do. And so we're pushing ourselves to the limits where we don't have to. So take a step back, think about your goals, and really set some realistic steps that are going to get you to the bigger goal. And then the last thing I want you to do is I want you to absolutely embrace imperfections in yourself. Ooh. Embrace imperfections. Let me just say this. I'm human. You are too. I mean, that's a fact. You are human. And sometimes we as humans, we make mistakes and we have imperfections. imperfections, nothing is going to always be right, always perfect in our lives. And if you can give yourself the latitude to embrace imperfections, to embrace the mistakes that you might make, I mean, heck, even give yourself latitude to make mistakes, then you're going to be better for it. Your life is absolutely going to be better for it. And I get it. None of us like to make mistakes. None of us like to feel imperfect in this world. But I do think that there's a gift in being comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? When things happen, as you're being imperfect, as you make mistakes, the feeling that come with that, I think there's something to it. I think there's something to really feeling like you're, like, oh my God, you might throw up, and or feeling like you can't breathe or can't talk, and then being able to calm yourself down and say, you know what? I'm only human and I'm going to make mistakes. I'm absolutely going to make mistakes because that is what it is. Ooh, Kathy, thank you so much. Kathy says, thank you for ordering my steps. I needed this today. Thank you, sis. Because here's the thing, we are imperfect beings. God made us that way. You know, the only person who wasn't imperfect is Him, right? He made us that way, right? And so I am so happy that we all know that we're in this together, and that we're all human beings. Every last one of us are human beings. And I realized that a long time ago when I made a financial mistake that for me at the time, it really messed the family up. Like it was a big hit to our finances, and it was something that I was ashamed of, that I felt like I put our family in jeopardy and all those things. And what really happened was I beat myself up so much, but my husband was the one to say, "Hey, we gonna get through this. You're a human being, and you're allowed to make mistakes, and we're gonna get through this." He was the one. He was the one willing to give me grace and mercy in a situation that I wasn't willing to give myself grace and mercy. Whew. This is why it's so important to have really good people around you. Because if everybody around you has to be held to these high standards of perfectionism, and you following right along with them, where you get your support from? Like, I mean, especially if you ain't got no therapist or if you ain't got no coach, sis, who can you talk to that's gonna allow you to show up like you need to show up? And then you go to work and have to be perfect there. So if you don't have a place of solace and a place of solitude in your own personal life, where you go? Where do you go to just be human? We got to find that out, right? We got to allow ourselves, number one, to be imperfect because we are imperfect beings. And number two, we got to allow ourselves to make mistakes. And number three, we have to allow ourselves to have a place or a person that we can go to who can support us. Okay. Yes. All right. So there's a couple things that you got. If you are joining me live, as soon as I finish, the replay is there for you. If you are listening to me on the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show podcast, go ahead and give me a like and give me a review, because my thing is this: if you can share this with somebody who needs it today, then you can be a blessing to other people, because that's what we're trying to do. We out here trying to help each other be a blessing by being a blessing. All right, so you can find the Dr. Kiki Ramsey Show on all the podcast stations, Spotify, Amazon, all of that. And you can watch some of the past episodes. I would say if this resonated with you, go back and check out the Unrealistic Expectations one. Oh my gosh, we dig in that. It was fire, right? So go back and check out that one. And then the last thing I want to say is, if you are a professional woman, a woman who wants support around succeeding in your career and finding harmony in your life, join us over at the Happy Women Lead Academy at happywomenlead.com. We would love to see you. We'd love to support you in the community. All right, y'all. Go out there and don't be trying to be flawless. Be yourself. And remember that you can always, always,